used to work at a McDonald's many years ago. Mostly I was a cashier and I would take people's orders. I often worked at night and there would sometimes be some pretty late nights. Back then, the McDonald's that I worked at was open until 2 o'clock in the morning. Things would typically quiet down significantly from about 8 p.m. to the rest of the night. The last few hours would generally be very slow. Sometimes on weekends or other random nights it would get busy, but generally it was pretty quiet. So one night I remember that I was working until 2 a.m. I can't remember what time it was exactly, but probably at about 10 o'clock it became just me and one other coworker. There was a girl named Gloria who I was friends with, and she was around my age, but had worked there a lot longer than me. She was a manager now and did whatever was needed, really. At this point I was taking orders and she was doing all the cooking. It was just us two until close. We got a few customers here and there and it was really pretty quiet. Soon midnight rolled around. I remember that I was out by the register standing there and just hanging out. I happened to notice someone was outside in the parking lot though. It was a man and he looked in on the large windows that we had. He was just standing there not moving, but appeared to be looking at me. Maybe it was partly because it was midnight and very quiet, but the sight of him instantly gave me the creeps. He had long hair, I remember, and a beard as well. He looked to be maybe in his 30s or so. I was sort of confused as to what he was doing and thought that maybe he would come inside. To be honest though, I didn't want him to. The man continued to stand there and stare at me. After like 30 seconds of this, I got too uncomfortable and I walked into the back. I went over to Gloria, who was bored with nothing to do because there were no customers. She was watching this mounted TV that was in the corner of the kitchen, so I joined her for a minute or two. Then I went back out to the front and I looked out of the window and the man was gone. I was glad to see that. So a while later, maybe an hour, I believe was the next customer to come inside. I helped them and I remembered that I gave them their food and they went to leave. It was then that I noticed the guy was outside of the window again. He was standing there and looking at me once more. I was surprised that he was back, and once more I did not want him to come inside, and he still didn't. After like a minute, I went to the back to tell Gloria about the guy, and when we came back, he was gone. I was a tiny bit disappointed because I wanted Gloria to see the strange man, but I was also glad that he was gone because I had been nervous that he was going to come inside. He just seemed really sketchy for some reason. So for the final hour of us being open, we didn't get any customers and I didn't see the guy. At 2 a.m. we locked up and several minutes later I was ready to leave. Because Gloria was the manager, she was going to stay back for a few minutes and finish up some other stuff. I was tired from work and excited to go home and sleep. So I went to the door. When I did though, I was afraid that the man was going to be out in the parking lot somewhere. I didn't see him, but I was still worried. So after I went outside, I just sprinted to my car, which was not that far away. Then I got inside and I started the engine. It was at that time when I looked out of the window and I saw the man standing on the other side of the parking lot a ways away. I was afraid that he might approach me or something, so I quickly drove away and left. By the next time that I worked, I had mostly forgotten about the man. Now, I believe it was like a week later, or maybe 2 weeks later. It was basically the same setup as before, which was fairly common. It was a quiet night at about midnight. Me and Gloria were the only two people working once again. So I recall that at some point a little after midnight, I saw the man again and I instantly remembered him. He was doing pretty much the same thing of just standing there outside and staring at me. But this time, after like 30 seconds, I saw him turn and walk away. I didn't know who this guy was or what he was doing. The way he would just stand there and stare at me was very creepy though. So I didn't see him after that for the rest of the time that we were open. At 2 a.m. we locked the doors. Soon after, I went to leave. This time though, before I left McDonald's, I noticed that the man was in the parking lot and he was standing right behind my car. I would have to walk right past him to go to my car and he was also staring at me. I went to Gloria to show her the guy. When she came back, she saw that the guy was still there. He was just standing there and staring at us both now. I wanted to leave, but I did not want to walk past him. After about a minute, we opened up the door and asked the man to please leave the property. When we said this, he did not leave, but instead he started walking in our direction. We quickly closed the doors again, which would automatically lock them. The man reached the doors and tried entering McDonald's. Thankfully, he couldn't get in. Gloria and I considered calling the police. We didn't want to have to do that if he wasn't dangerous or anything though, so we decided to just wait around for a short time longer. Gloria and I finished up everything that had to be done. By the time that we were done with that, the man was still in the parking lot. We waited around for probably another 10 minutes. Then, finally, we saw the man casually walk away and leave the McDonald's premises. Gloria and I then went to the door and we both quickly ran for our cars. We were then able to leave and go home. After that shift, I never saw the man again. I only worked at the McDonald's for about another month though. I think that Gloria worked there longer, so it will be interesting to know if she ever saw the guy again. One thing for sure though is that he definitely gave me the creeps. The way he just stood there staring at me in the empty parking lot is something that I will never forget. This story happened back in 1999. When I was a kid, I used to love going to McDonald's. It was probably my favorite restaurant, and I loved getting the Happy Meals. They would come with a toy, and I thought that was really cool. So back during this time period, I was 7 years old, and I remember that I was hanging out with my cousins and sister one day. We were at my uncle's house, which was actually on the same street as my parents' house. It was cool to live close by, and we would hang out a lot. At the time, my sister was 9 years old, and my cousins were aged 5, 10, and the oldest was 14. The 14-year-old was a girl named Jane, and she would babysit all of us a lot back then. So I remember that us kids wanted to go to McDonald's. Jane was supposed to take us there, but we lived close enough to walk. It was just outside of our neighborhood and probably less than a mile away, so all of us kids left my uncle's house and started walking there. I don't really recall much about the walk there, but when we arrived at the McDonald's, we went in and got Happy Meals. Then we went to the area in the back that had the play place and started hanging out there. Us kids were going through the jungle gym tunnels and down the slides and stuff in the play place. As you know, the play place would be at the back side of the restaurant in like another room back then. Then there were a few tables in that area and many more tables in the regular dining room part of the McDonald's. From what I remembered, there were not too many people at the McDonald's that day. But as us kids were in the play place, there were a few other kids that joined in who I didn't know. I think it was 2 or 3 of them. After playing for a long time, I remember also noticing that there was a woman sitting in a chair in the play place room sort of watching us. I assumed that she was a parent of one of the kids who I didn't know. The lady was the only adult in that room, and my cousin Jane was sitting in the other McDonald's dining room not really watching us. So I remember that after a while I went down one of the slides and I was not that far away from the woman when I got to the bottom. She was looking at me and I sort of had to walk by her. When I did, she said hi to me and I stopped and said hi back to her. She called me over closer to her and I was confused. I remember that she seemed friendly. The woman then asked me if I wanted to get some food. I was confused and said that I already did. She asked me if I wanted an ice cream sundae. I said sure. Then what the woman said next made me very suspicious. She asked me to go out to her car really quick and get some coins with her to buy the ice cream. I already found it strange that she was talking with me in the first place. This just seemed really weird. I was young but not stupid. My parents had told me to never go in a stranger's car. I didn't really answer the woman. That's when she said, "Come on," and started to get up and sort of grab my hand. I just turned and ran away from her back to the jungle gym at that point. All the other kids were playing inside of it. When I got back in, I went up and went through some tunnels until I saw my cousins. Then I went to a window in the tunnel and looked out. The woman was still sitting there and just watching us, sort of. I happened to run into one of the other kids in the play place. I asked him if that was his mom, and he said no. Then I asked the other kid, and she also said that was not her mom. So this woman was not a parent of anybody in the play place. I thought that was kind of weird. I didn't really want to leave and go near her again. However, maybe 10 or 15 minutes later, I remember looking out again and the woman was not there. Not too long after this, Jane came into the play place room and said that it was time for us to go. So at that point, all of us kids walked out to leave. As we were going through the main part of McDonald's, I saw the woman sitting by herself at a booth. We left the McDonald's then and started heading home. For the first part of the walk back, it was normal. But I would say about halfway, I remembered that this car drove down the road really slow past us. And when it did, I was sure that I saw the same woman was driving it. It went out of sight, but like a minute or two later, I saw it drive by again. And then, a short time after that, when we were on the next road which is quieter, it started driving slowly behind us. Jane had picked up on this as well, and I remember that she told us to walk faster. We did sort of, but with a bunch of kids that were young, it was probably hard. I remember that suddenly, Jane told us to follow her. She had turned and started going into a random person's yard. We all followed her and went around the house and behind it. She must have known the neighborhood really well and knew where she was going, because the next thing I knew, we walked through like 2 or more people's yards, and then we went back on our street. I had no idea where we were until I saw the street. Then we were able to make it back safely to my uncle's house. Jane made us all go inside, and I remember that she told her parents about the car following us. That's when I told her about the woman I saw. I'm not really sure what happened after that. I don't know if they called the police or if they called the McDonalds or anyone. I'm just really glad that I didn't agree to go with that woman. Looking back, it kind of gives me the creeps to think about it.